afternoon. I think this is our first official meeting of the District of Sechelt Council and Committee in 2018. So welcome to a new year. It's going to be lots of fun. It's going to be a short year, so the ride will be a little faster than sometimes. But we try not to go too high or too low. We'll just go fast. I'm calling to order the Finance, Culture and Economic Development Committee meeting for Wednesday, January 17th, and it's about 2.5 minutes after 1 p.m. And the first item is adoption of an agenda that was circulated, and I look for a motion to, thank you, Councillor Mueller, Councillor Lutz. I'll try and get the names back in my mind. Any additions or deletions? Any additions from staff? Nothing from council. All those in favor of adoption? That's carried, and we can move along to the very first delegation. And I was told you wouldn't be here, and you're here. Margaret, if you'd like to take the delegation seat, and we'll move the slides over to your presentation and look forward to listening. And I'll turn that on as soon as you do. It's on.
Thank you. Can we put it into the slide mode, presentation mode? Oh, that's, yes, sorry, it is in PDF. I sent both, but thank you. Well, good afternoon, Mayor Milne and committee members, councillors. Thank you for receiving the Sechelt Library delegation today. I am happy to report that this community on the Sunshine Coast makes excellent use of its local public library, its programs and services. I'm here today to report on the progress of 2017, report on the result of taxpayers' investment dollars in the library, request for an increase in operating funds for 2018, request that after 21 years, the archives are no longer housed in the library boardroom, and update you on the Canada 150 renovation. Thank you. Our request is based on a need for increased operating costs in 2018. There is no provision in the Memorandum of Understanding to make this request to reflect the levels of funding of other Sunshine Coast public libraries. The increase of $1.53 per capita for 2018 is not sufficient to meet the library's current operating needs. Library visits have increased by 19% over the past 5 years. These are in-person visits. Digital off-site access to library services also continue to increase. These numbers do not include the nearly 2,500 participants of our programs, which take place outside of the library, elsewhere in the community, because of lack of space in the library. Our children's programs continue to thrive, but with a renewed emphasis on in-library programs and storytelling because of economy and resources. 2017 was the first year that the library employed a part-time adult library program and outreach coordinator for a full year. Library surveys and community feedback showed interest in regular programs aimed at adults. Programs range from a month-long celebration of poetry to a week-long focus on mental health, intergenerational play between seniors and children, discussion of the opioid crisis, financial literacy, free writing groups, language conversation groups, end-of-life planning, technology literacy, and support of many other groups and clubs. I would like to thank Cheryl Latimer for her commitment to bringing this quality of programming to our community. Public libraries change and respond to the diverse changes in our society. We see a slight decline in borrowing of physical items, and yet an increase in visits to the library. Our interlibrary loan lending and borrowing is up 20% from 2016 because of the new easy-to-use system. The library is not just about books anymore, and that fact is not hurting the health or the relevance of the library. It also demonstrates that technology, ebooks, databases, technology education and engagement, and the availability of computers, tablets, and software is a larger role in the services that we are providing to the community. In July 2017, we created a new full-time position dedicated to technology education in response to public requests and the results of over 1,000 community questionnaires. The response has been phenomenal. This has also enabled us to provide STEAM programming for children: science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, and these programs are available to schools and to the public. It involves simple computer coding and using Play-Doh as a conductor of electricity. Our technology education coordinator applied and was awarded a $4,000 TELUS grant for a pilot mobile makerspace project for all ages and will include simple robotics. I was happy to say that we met with the TELUS representatives this morning. This slide was developed at the SCRD's request, which asked us to prioritize the budget projects. So each line in the table is a project. This is not about capital purchases, but ongoing operating costs. As a result, purchasing more materials for the library to loan to the community is at the top of the list because it is a one-time purchase, as opposed to an ongoing staff salary. The items in bold are prioritized within the project area. The total gap in funding is $262,274 for all of the funders in the Memorandum of Understanding. Our request today is for the district's share of that gap based on per capita funding and is $145,000 of that total amount. The remainder will be requested from areas A, B, D, and the SIDG. This is an ongoing list of the projects. Staff who were hired 9 years ago on a part-time basis are now qualified library technicians who have adapted to a changing world and provide an increasing range of skilled services, including programming for the visually impaired, maintaining the library website, and advancing digital cataloging techniques. Job descriptions need to reflect the changing world. Their positions need to be updated and reclassified. And the union, CUPE Local 391, has drawn this to our attention. The Sechelt Community Archives is an important connection to our community and history. It is run by the well-loved and well-respected archivist Ann Watson and a small team of dedicated and committed volunteers. It is overcrowded, and it is open 1 day a week. In 20 years, it received 1,256 visits and written queries. In contrast, in 2017, 1 year, the library hosted over 2,000 people in library programs held off-site for lack of library space. Ann Watson has communicated to Council about the need to move to a more appropriate location. We ask that this action is taken in 2018 to turn the space over to the library and find a suitable new home for the archives. There is a correction in this slide. The library is currently open 48 hours per week, not 51, as shown on the slide. I have come to the difficult but necessary decision, supported by the library board, to reduce hours open to the public. Due to the increasing demand for services, pressure is being put on library staff. No library staffing hours will be lost, as staff will be doing the necessary work behind the scenes to keep our library running smoothly and efficiently. Canada 150 renovation, funded solely by community support in the Canada 150 grant, will be completed by March the 31st, 2008. We are relying heavily on donors, like the Friends of the Library, for basic needs such as new self-checkout machines. Delays in the production of parts for the door are currently holding up the process, but we look forward to the fresh, inclusive, and accessible changes that will be a result. I would like you to consider the role of the library in the community. Public libraries have a history of social responsibility, and our library is no different. They are not strictly transactional organizations based on the borrowing and returning of goods. Unlike banks or department stores, libraries are public service institutions that actively defend the right of the homeless to come in from the cold. They actively promote literacy and newcomers. They actively provide safe, respectful, and welcoming places for all people, regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, mental health, or financial circumstances. Thank you for your time today, and we hope that we have given you a broader context to place the Sechelt Library and our request for an increase in operating funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will look to see if there's first any clarifications or comments from committee before you depart, and then we'll move on. First, Councillor Inkster.
You got me first?
No, Councillor Inkster.
So I just want to, I've asked you this about a year and a bit ago, and I just want a clarification on it. The archives are really important, and I've spoken to that over the years to our community in terms of historical record. A number of years ago, a plan was put in place with some funding, working with other agencies to digitize the archives. And
I have no idea, I'm afraid.
Okay.
The archives aren't under my purview.
okay, because that speaks to the need for storage when the fact that the plan was to digitize the entire archives over, because you need to digitize them, because you need to have the original copy and then a digitized copy in our technological age. So you know nothing about that. Okay.
No, the archivist is not an employee of the Sechelt Library.
Okay. So hopefully somebody else knows, because that's a really important piece in terms of going forward, in terms of preservation. So
It doesn't change the space requirements because, as you mentioned, you keep the original and you digitize. So it changes the use and access, but it doesn't change the actual space requirements. And while we're on the archives, we call it the Sechelt Archives. I think it's more of an I think it was started with a donation from the Helen Dawes collection, which is primarily Sechelt. Another major part of the archives is the Sunshine Coast Golf Course. For whatever reasons, I don't know, a huge amount came in there, which is from Roberts Creek. So it is something that is broader than just Sechelt, and we have to look at that. And I see Councillor Lutz next. And then we're down here. We'll start with Councillor Lutz.
Could we go to page 8 of the agenda? I'm a little confused by the figures. The 104,000, those totals listed under technology and community engagement, are they to total to 104? Because I come out with a different answer.
Yeah, just let me find that page, Councillor Lutz. Oh, I'm in the wrong one.
There it is.
It should, and if there's any errors, they're strictly my error. I had a lower number listed for the public services supervisor position, and I was questioned by the board about that number. So I took money out of the technology and community engagement and put it into the public services supervisor position. So if it doesn't add up to that, I apologize. The numbers for each project should add up to 242, 274. I can certainly revise that and submit it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Councillor Mueller.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just had another couple questions for clarity. Page 5, that adult programming slide, there it is.
Yeah.
So the blue is the number of events produced, is that right?
Correct.
And between 16th and 17th, a producer was hired, is that right?
Correct. 29 programs in 2016 and 69 adult programs in 2017. Attendance in 2016 was 488 people, and in 2017 we had 1,958 attendees to the adult programs.
Okay, and what kinds of events are those? Just giving me an idea of.
Yeah, discussion of the opioid crisis, talk on medical marijuana, reading clubs,
Meditation Mondays.
Meditation Mondays, elders, an elder women drop-in group, Tech Tuesdays.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it just gives me an idea of
You
the
bet.
types of events.
Some of the other things that I have here, that we do a week-long project programming on mental health. And in April, there was sidewalk poetry. We brought in the school students. It was April, was Poetry Month. And also we were celebrating Canada 150. And so there was a string of poetry that was submitted for a contest that the district graciously gave us permission to string between the trees. So you may have seen that in May. And that was the Sechelt poetry programming in play.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're
And then on page 8 again, the list of figures.
Yeah.
We'll go to that. So if I can just be clear about what you said, the $20,000 was for, that was the priority request.
Correct.
To update the collection, and then the rest, is that in any order of preference, or is that just a?
The problem was that the SCRD Special Projects Form is for capital projects, which means that it doesn't need any continued funding. And all of my requests are for operational. So it doesn't fit the hole that it's supposed to go into. So the only one that does not require, the only project does not require extended funding could be updating the collection with $20,000. The second project, technology and community engagement, there's a breakdown. Some of the items need sustainable funding, and some of the items in that project do not. So the ones that are highlighted are the priorities.
Okay.
It's the case of putting a round peg in a square hole, I'm afraid.
Oh, we understand that from budgeting, but thanks, that was all I had.
Is that okay?
It's not always easy for us to see the bolded ones, and I think that's what's happened, but they are there. And if we look closely, we can see them on our print copy as well. Are there other comments while the librarian's with us? We certainly recognize the need for a standalone space for archives. It's been a priority in the cultural field for some time, but not one that's been addressed. I can't even say it hasn't been addressed adequately. It simply has not been addressed. And I think we're aware of that and need to work on that. So we thank you for your presentation, and it'll be folded into our budget requirements. And
Thank you very much.
And while we're on this item for the director and finance department, I'm always interested in not just the totals that we see for the per capita of local government funding. This would be on the page 3 of the slide, which shows Powell River Gibson's and Sechelt funding. And I know that that reflects the total. I think it would also be useful for us to see the District of Sechelt contribution and our full contribution, including capital, and what we contribute on a per capita annual basis, annually we contribute, and then we can compare that to the needs and look for that. I'm looking forward to the day on the Sunshine Coast when from Egmont through to Langdale and Port Mellon, there's a very similar contribution to the library needs across the region. And it's everyone shares in the same tax base and everyone can contribute to the libraries we have. And we're not there yet. Just one more thought. I read over in the last 48 hours a report that was written in 2011, I think, about library and about the library funding, and it was prior to the 5-year plan that's put in place. And one of the lines, it was written by somebody who's in the room, one of the lines that struck me was the statement coming after 2008, that it's evident that in times of recession, library use expands and goes up. And I read that and I thought, well, we're in the middle of an economic boom, and I don't see that library use has dropped. So librarians will use whatever economic conditions are available to argue for their best bet. If times are down, use goes up, and if times are good, they need a share of that. Okay. And Councillor Inkster, before we move on.
Yeah, sure. So process question. This is obviously a increase request. It's a little bit more substantial than previous years. The increase request is multi-jurisdictional. So the question would then be if in fact, the two budget processes will be interlocking in a sense and happening at the same time. I guess we're hoping that if in fact we did approve additional funding, that the other areas, even though one or two are not contributing to the level that you had indicated, we would hope they would on a regional basis, that if in fact they don't step forward with that commitment, I guess do we then adjust according to a proportional amount that reflects what's going on now, or are we then going to be expected and or required to potentially cover the amount that is not available at that point financially?
I think there's two things to keep in mind in terms of process. One, we're in the midst of a 5-year contract, and that was put in place to ensure stable, ongoing funding over a period of time, and whether it worked or not, that's very important for us to keep in mind. And secondly, yes, there are various funders that contribute to the library, but I think their decisions are standalone. If in fact our decision is not matched or met, or their decision is not matched or met, because who knows what direction it'll go, the library will then prioritize based on the budget that they have. But they are independent decisions. It would be nice, maybe that one of the efforts is to make it so they're no longer independent decisions. Anything else on the library while we're here? Moving on then to item 4, which is adoption of the minutes of our Finance, Culture and Economic Development. These are simply for receipt. They've been to council already. Councillor Wright moved receipt, and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? Thank you. And is there any business arising from those? Again, the recommendations have gone forward, but Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. On page 15, last paragraph in 3.2. Like we were looking for a little more information on clarification of boundaries, etc. in that. I'm wondering if staff have made a note of that and when it'll be coming forward.
Not yet? Okay. That was a delegation that came forward and was concerned about roads, and we wanted to make sure that we were looking at the right spots in the right places. So that'll be followed up. Thank you for noting that, Councillor Seegers. Moving then to business items. Our 2018 budget early approval request. First, a motion to receive the report from the Director of Corporate and Financial Services. Thank you, Councillor Lutz. Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? And I will look to the Director of Corporate and Financial Services to speak to why we should make early approvals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, so this report is to recommend to Council to give early approval to some selected one operating budget item and some capital projects as well. The main reason on the operating item is really just a timing of process. It would certainly help with the process to get approval now. I'll go into detail in a moment. And the capital budget ones, it's really to allow us to start designing and going to tender now for projects. Has multiple advantages. A, we can get tenders completed in place by the spring, so we can actually start construction this year on some of these projects. And also it allows for hopefully better pricing as we can hopefully get ahead of some of the other projects that may be coming down from other areas, so we can hopefully get ahead and get better scheduling and pricing for them. So my plan was to go through each of the projects, and staff are here to discuss them further if necessary. So the first one is the community investment program. Really, the issue here is that the investment program committee meets in February to adjudicate the grant applications that have been coming in. So we felt it would be beneficial for the committee to know in advance how much money they had to work with. In prior years, the amount of applications have exceeded the amount of money available to them, so it was certainly beneficial for them to be aware of how much money they had to work with. Just to let you know, this is an increase. Originally, the budget was put together for $65,000. This was really based on prior year applications that came in. Last year, there was, I believe, $134,000 in applications that came in, and about $52,000 were given out. So we'd increased the budget to 65. We've recently been getting the applications in. The application numbers are down significantly. So one consideration for the committee is we could suggest that the budget for 2018 could be 55,000, not 65,000, based on the applications coming in. Again, there still has to be an adjudication process from the committee to determine that it does meet the district's needs, that it's valid, et cetera. But we don't think $65,000 will be required. So if the committee would like to approve a lesser amount, that would certainly be an option for you. I assume we go through these one by one.
Are you thinking we'll discuss and vote on these items as they come forward?
That was what I assumed, yes.
Okay. Then let's look for somebody to put recommendation 2.2 on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Lutz. And Councillor Wright, that early approval of the Community Investment Program budget of $65,000 be granted. Staff has spoken to the issue. Are there any questions of staff further to what we've just heard? Councillor Inkster. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you have any indication as to why the numbers are coming in a lot lower. Are we getting less applications or just for lesser amounts?
Both.
No, we have about the same number of applications. There's some people who applied last year, received grants, but did not apply again this year, so it's a different mix of applicants. And some applicants are doing completely different projects, so the amounts they're requesting are less, so it's kind of a bit of everything. But so far we have about 24 applications, which is pretty standard. That's usually where we're at, somewhere between 20 and 25 applications a year.
Okay, and the deadline for applications has passed?
Just at 4:30 p.m. on Monday, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Inkster.
So I'm not sure if this question could be answered by staff. Perhaps it can be answered or shed light on from the committee member that's been sitting on it for a couple of years in terms of the applications and the criteria and the historical funding needs that we've seen in terms of speaking to this reduction. I do know that there's a group locally that was a youth group that hasn't received funding that I thought was really important. So, and I've spoken to Councillor Lutz about that, but the adjudication appears to be, as far as I can tell, quite thorough, so I'm sure they've thought about it. But I was wondering if, we're looking at a difficult year. So if we look at any cuts we can make, I wanted to hear some rationale for why we should increase it to that amount, maybe from Councillor Lutz, and I would consider that, considering that there's some needs in our community that are continuous.
Are you able to respond to that? That's kind of a difficult question to put. Committee liaisons and committee chairs aren't necessarily advocates for the roles that they're sitting in. They're council representatives there. So asking a councillor to sort of might be better to look to see if staff can provide you a rationale on why the increase was suggested in the first place. Think you could do that? Thanks.
We've been experiencing for at least a few years now a situation where typically the requests are close to double the amount that we actually have budgeted for the grants. So we were anticipating that might happen again. Obviously, this was still, if that had happened again, this still wouldn't have met that. But so far, it's not looking like we have that large amount of request. So it is probably going to work if we kept it at the same level we had it at last year, which is why we're saying, although when at the time that the report was written, when we didn't have applications in to look at, 65,000 seemed like a reasonable amount. Now that we've had a chance to start reviewing applications, it's possible that the amount that we had last year for this budget will also work for this year. The main priority for us is to be able to provide a number to the committee to work with. It is a lot easier for them to provide recommendations to council on how to fund grants if they know what council is willing to work within, than to just have them look at applications and try to make recommendations without a budget in mind.
Councillor Mueller, then I'll put myself on the list. I'm a bit confused.
Yeah, I think hopefully I can shed a bit of light on this through some questions. So wasn't that long ago that we redid the policy on this? I remember it coming through council, and I don't recall there being anything about an increase tied to that in time. But I may be wrong. Do you have the details on that? Was there anything changed regarding to the funding in that policy? I think that's the only time we've really discussed it.
No, no, the amount that's put into this budget every year isn't in the policy. The budget for this program isn't tied to the policy.
So then there's nothing policy related, so then it's just a choice. And clearly, I think, in the long term, if we were seeing a pattern that made us want to change the policy about how much is going in there, then that would be something but in a budget year like this, where we're seeing a large-scale tax increase, maybe it's prudent just to keep it steady. That's my take.
Okay, so my question on this is, I'm hearing that the applications in 2018 are not at $135,000, so they're not double what the requests were, but are they in excess of $65,000? And are you then therefore pre-selecting as you go through them and sort of saying, well, these are good and these aren't so good? So do you have a rough idea of what the total ask is from the community?
Our rough estimate is 55,000.
Wow. So you could actually provide funding to every request this year for less than 65, less than 60.
Assuming that every request does meet the requirements and would be recommended.
And that includes the line items. And does it include Oceans Day?
No.
Because we'd asked the Conservation Association to come back to the district for the second year of Oceans Day, and we thought that would come through the CIP program.
We have not received an application from that organization.
Okay, so that's something we want to keep in mind. If we reduce it here, the second year of that annual program has to be thought through. And I think this is one of our strongest programs. I certainly don't want to increase budgets just for the sake of increasing them, but it's always been our weakest funded and strongest program. But you're saying it's just the reverse this year. We actually have more money than required, so that's a very good sign. Now going to my left, I think Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is probably one of the programs where I'd like to see an increase. However, I get really nervous when the finance side of me starts to come out. This is the first item on our agenda, and we're looking at a $13,000 increase. And we're going to give it early approval as well. I understand why we would give it early approval, but I guess you need to keep a running tab of how many dollars you're starting to add to the budget. And when the first one comes through at $13,000, I know there's going to be a whole lot more. And you got to, I just can't I just can't vote for this. I'll vote for the early approval, but not for the $65,000 and the increase. I believe we need to keep it at the 52. And at the end of our budget process, because we know it's going to be a tough financial year, we can make a list of those things, okay, that are in the parking lot that we want to say, yeah, okay, we're going to take that $13,000 and add it in because it's the most important thing that we need to do. Those are my comments, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarity, the $65,000 number is in the draft budget book that was circulated recently when we looked at our 7.7% tax increase for 2018. So it's actually already been included in the draft budget. They're just bringing it to our attention now. So, but I'm hearing very clearly that early approval, and people are wondering why would you approve more than is needed. So, Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm looking for some clarification on those numbers. When you mentioned the 100 and whatever thousand that it was last year was the year when we actually set up some of those as standing grants.
That's the number without those included, actually.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the 100 and, okay, so
Yeah.
that, and Sunshine Coast Tourism, for example, not included in that 100?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's been like that for at least 2 years, but I think longer. This morning we were looking at it, and we were able to confirm that at least for the last 2 years, even removing tourism and the standing grants, we still were getting asks over 100,000 when the budget was only around 50,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Someday we'll figure out what happened. But in the meantime, I think we need an amendment to what's on the floor. What's on the floor is early approval of a budget of $65,000, and I'd look for somebody to amend that to 52 or 55. I heard 55 from staff, 52, so I'll give you first crack. Councillor Mueller, what's the number? Oh.
I would move early approval with a budget of 52,000.
That's the amendment, to amend that to
Yep.
52,000?
Amend it.
And is there a seconder? Lots of seconders. Any discussion of that number? Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we should be prepared for those times that are more difficult, although I would like to see us talk one day about 2 intakes with this. It's been brought up before, and I think Ms. Jordison was talking about it, so I'd love to see us talk about it one time.
Any further discussion of the number, the amendment that's on the floor? All those in favor? That's carried. And then can we look at the actual recommendation, early approval of the Community Investment Program budget of $52,000 be granted? Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? That's carried. And a note to staff to help us think through a 2 intake policy, which I know the town of Gibsons does. SCRD doesn't, but they actually have an intake in the fall as well as in the spring. You might help us to think about that.
Our committee has discussed that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then maybe a report at some point about the discussion. Thank you. And moving on to 2.3, early approval of Nessman Beach Access Phase 2 capital project for $10,000 be granted. I'll look to the director to speak to it first, or to Barry. Mr. Schmidt.
Well, actually, just to let you know, I meant to
Are the rest all capital?
They are all capital, yes. I meant to tell you before what I suggested to the staff is I would introduce every project and give sort of the Cole's notes on what it's about. And then if there's questions, the technical resources are here to answer those questions. Okay. Otherwise, move on.
And somewhere between when you introduce it and when we start asking questions, we'll get the motion on the floor. So we'll start, though, with your introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this first capital project we're suggesting for early approval is the Nessman Beach Access. It's a $10,000 project. The purpose is to build additional stairs as an improvement to the beach access that was built in 2004. The project will provide more accessibility to a wider demographic of users, and staff would like to see the project completed before the spring. And it is funded from the gas tax reserve, or proposed to be funded from gas taxes.
Okay, Councillor Lutz moves, so we have it for discussion, and Councillor Wright second, and I saw Councillor Wright wanting to discuss, and I will have a question as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that this is the beach access where there is a concrete driveway that encroaches on the beach access for a waterfront property. And the last time I was down there, the concrete driveway was eroded. It's got a big long curve where it comes onto the beach access and it's eroded underneath. Will this also deal with that encroachment onto the beach access?
No, there was no plans for that. That would be the responsibility of the homeowner.
And just for
Well,
clarification, it's not an encroachment. The previous council gave a license to occupy.
Did they give a license to occupy that? Okay, thank you.
However, one of the few people, Councillor Wright's walked it, I've walked it. It was a brand new staircase, and it was, other than being exceedingly steep and a cardiac risk for anyone of any age, what do we need new stairs for?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for listening to this request. Basically, when we built this access, and it was actually only 5 years ago, it was in 2013, at the bottom you'll see 3 flights of stairs, and then it goes to a switchback. And switchbacks are a lot cheaper than stairs, but this switchback isn't safe. It's eroding. To me, it's a safety concern. So even at the time, the contractor that we were using would say it would be really sweet if we could build one more flight of stairs and it would connect right to the bottom. And I think this is a good time for that project, mostly because of the potential subdivision homes that could be up to 82 additional homes that could be using this access. So there's actually another part to it too. At the top, we went again with a trail because trails are cheaper than stairs, but this trail is steep and it just doesn't meet the needs of our community. So this request is really just to do phase 2, to upgrade this to the level of that we want to upgrade all our beach accesses to for the demographic that we're serving.
Nice link to the subdivision that's coming in. It's 66 lot subdivision, actually, not 82, but
I believe there's a second one
a good link.
possibly on the other side, and I think maybe 82.
there'll be more once the development comes. And Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, it was more of a general question about this, and there's a few others from the parks sector that are come. They're small projects, but I'm just curious about the flow of work through your department that would require you to have these early, just the question about early approval.
This would actually be done by a contractor, so I would just manage the project myself. It wouldn't involve staff time.
And so the need for early approval then is
To get it in before summer starts. I don't really want to wait on this one. I just really feel uncomfortable with the switchback below and the way it deteriorated in the last 5 years. I just don't think it's safe. So I would like to get it built before the heavy use season, which starts probably in, once the weather warms up, April.
Yeah, fair enough. Appreciate it. Thanks.
And Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be supporting this because of the information provided to us on the safety risks that were spoken to by Mr. Schmidt. And if we do look at any other process and or non-fixing, people will use it anyway on stairs that have been deemed not safe. So because it's already been declared a beach access that is being used and will be used by a number of people in the area. So we just need to fix it up so it's safer and easier to use by our public.
Thank you. And when I use the ones that are very challenging, I always wonder if we do any traffic counts on any of our. Do we have any idea if many people use this twice?
No, we really don't know how many people are using our accesses. It's that they're all well used and they're all well loved because they serve the nearby neighborhoods that need access to the beach.
Okay. So we have this on the floor. Any further discussion? Early approval and the amount. All those in favor? That's carried. 2.4, early approval of wildlife-resistant garbage cans.
I'll move the.
Thank you, Councillor Lutz. Councillor Seegers seconding, and we'll allow the director to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, this is to install wildlife-resistant garbage cans in Kinnickinnick and Davis Bay the Kinnick Forest and the Davis Bay Esplanade. It'll be increase safety in the area, reduce wildlife-human encounters, and reduce garbage and rat populations. And again, the goal would be to have this in by the spring. So again, why the early request is coming forward now.
And is this named Davis Bay because it's only going into Davis Bay early and then Kinnick later, or is it? I've always
Well,
been tripping
there's
over
the
that.
request is for 8 cans and 7 of them are going into Davis Bay. One is going at the trailhead by the elementary school at Kinnick.
Any discussion? Again, it's safety and wildlife.
Safety, and the early request is to get it done before the bears come out. We've had a number of instances where the bears walk from one end of the parkway to the other and get into every garbage can as they go along. And our concern is that it's also used by a lot of people and the human interaction with wildlife. The other issue, the secondary issue with the rats, is quite important as well.
So this will drive the bears into the residential areas?
The plan.
All those in favor? Thanks. Okay. 2.5.
Thank you, Worship. So, the next project is for the Trail Avenue sewer relocation from Toreto Lane to Toreto Street on Long Cowrie. The sanitary sewer along Trail Avenue currently takes a large detour. It's running 400 linear meters. Completion of the project would decrease the sewer length to 110 meters, allowing a shorter connection with less likelihood of projects. This project would be funded from the sewer reserve, and the goal would be to get the work done sooner and get the tenders out now.
Thank you. This is put on the table moved by Councillor Seegers, thank you, and Councillor Mueller. Any discussion or queries about this? So why did they take the long route the first time?
That I don't know.
You're coming in and saying they took 400 meters and it should have been 300.
The previous lift station was on in Inlet Avenue.
Okay.
Now it's relocated to Toreto Street beside the watermark.
Okay, so with the watermark development, we changed the lift stations, and now we can do another part to tighten up the sewer line. Okay. And Councillor Mueller.
Okay, thank you. This is kind of a more general question. We got a number of here that are related to trail and the trail construction project. Is this one considered to be a part of the trail construction project?
Exactly. So if we not doing now, so we providing the brand new the asphalt, and the later date we have to cut that one. So we have to avoid that. We have to do the same time during the construction of Trail Avenue.
So you're linking it to the Trail Avenue, but is it necessary as part of the Trail Avenue construction?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's depending on the council approval.
Oh, right, but it is considered part of the overall works associated, yeah.
Yes, so there's the development at Cowrie and Trail Avenue.
Yes.
So we asked the developer to do this work, but we don't know the timing. Sometimes we don't know the timing that project is going on. So, but we schedule Trail Avenue construction this year. So then we thought it to do the same time this one.
And then there'll be latecomers, but it's coming out of reserve.
Right, and I guess with early approval, you'll be able to get a start on all these. I know it's a big project with a lot of pieces, so is that kind of the intent with the early approval?
Yes, we hope to put a tender on April for Trail Avenue.
April, okay.
Okay, well, I'll be supporting these as well as some of the others here related to trail. It's about time we got this project going.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. I didn't see any opposed. And 2.7, early approval of the Trail Avenue Storm Trunk Line, ebb tide to Pebble. Sorry, I've already written there. Sorry, 2.6, early approval of Trail Bay Waterfront Trail to Ocean Community Park Capital Project. Moved by Councillor Mueller, Councillor Seegers, thank you. and introduced by the Director of Corporate and Financial Services.
Thank you, Worship. So this project for $174,000 is to provide a safe walking, cycling, recreational facility along the waterfront between Trail and Ocean Avenue. Project will include closing the current lane for traffic and provide an improved, safe pedestrian walkway. It is part of our DCC program, so the majority of the funding comes from development cost charges, with the 1% assist factor coming from general taxation.
Any questions or, thank you, Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. I think just for those of us that are on planning and not on Parks and Public Works, probably less familiar with this project than others, but I'm just curious to date if there's been any type of community engagement around this project.
Have we spoken to the neighbors in particular?
Not at this time. There will be public consultations. There'll be a design process. We like to get this project started a lot earlier so we can have a design and maybe get into construction later on. The first phase might be just a sidewalk. Right now we have a lot of pedestrian vehicle conflicts, but yes, there will be a public consultation.
Okay. Thank you.
That raised more questions than it answered, but I'll wait until Councillor Seeger's finished and then I'll ask.
Thank you. To Councillor Mueller's question, I know when this came forward a number of years ago, there actually was consultation at that time with the owners existing who were in support of it at that time. I don't know what ownership has changed since then, so I don't know what the feedback will be, but they were wondering when we were going to actually move forward with it. They had the back lane for access to their property, so they weren't concerned about that.
Thank you. And Councillor Councillor Shanks? Sure.
Yeah, it's actually a wider issue than the people just on the boulevard, unfortunately, or fortunately. It's the only vehicle access that those who are somewhat disabled and enjoy the sound of the ocean can take their vehicles to, and along the entire waterfront within the downtown village of Sechelt boundaries themselves. So I would encourage that we have the consultation, if it's to take place at all, with the entire community in terms of how that can work, where vehicle traffic and sidewalks can sort of coexist. When you look along that entire strip, many years ago, I'm sure there was a lane of some kind from Wharf Road right up to Snicket Park. But this is the only remaining section where I can see that we can or could accommodate both vehicle traffic as well as pedestrian traffic. So I would like to see that consultation take place first. It means a lot to a lot of people, I believe, and especially it's the last remaining section of road where people would be able to, in fact, drive and enjoy the views and the sounds of the waterfront. So that's my input.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Wright.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Like Councillor Shanks, I'd like to make sure that the public engagement is community-wide, not just the people, okay, who are fronting on this roadway, because there are a large number of people who use that. I mean, people go down there and park their cars and have lunch and all kinds of things. So I think it needs to be across the entire community. And I'll support it, though, at that point. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. I too feel we need public input. I'm one of the people who both walk and drive that section of road. And when this came before council a couple of years back, the thought of closing down that section of road to traffic, I was doing a poll of the people I would meet or see sitting in cars. And though there is parking close by and wheelchairs could access, there are still people who take family members who they can't transfer out of their car to move them to where they can enjoy the beach. I too think it's a much bigger issue than just the neighborhood. I would hate to see it closed, but I think we need to have the public's input first. So I'm not going to support this early funding.
Thank you, and Councillor Inkster, which I thought was a moment ago.
Yeah, thank you. I'm assuming, though, that once this decision is made and we've requested public consultation, that the information will come back to a committee, most likely Parks and Public Works. It might go to planning based on where that particular consultation goes, but I'm assuming it will come back to us. The road itself, of course, those that live there would like to limit the car traffic in front of their own homes, but there has been wider use made by the community. One of the discussions could be nodes at each end that would be made larger for those vehicles, for those people to access that point. If we don't go in this direction of revitalization of this road with pathways and more pedestrian access, we most likely will have to look at what we're going to do with that road anyway. If council members, and has been indicated, a number have, they'll notice that that road's in quite a state of disrepair, not only to the sides, but down the middle of it, caused by degradation and root issues with some of the trees. So if we don't go this route, we're going to have to look at what we're going to do with that road anyway.
Thank you. I was came in this morning prepared to support this until I heard that we have a $174,000 project, and the director involved says, well, we might do this, we got to get a design, we're not sure, we might do sidewalks first. I thought you knew what you were going to do on this, and that's why we were going to approve $175,000. So if you don't know, how much money do you need, and how much do you really think you need for this?
Again, we would like to have that public consultation before, and again, phase the project in if necessary, perhaps again, keeping that corridor open or just creating a sidewalk so it's safe for pedestrians. So this is all going to come out when we go to the public and say, okay, what is the needs of the community, and eliminating the safety issues and having.
So how did you set the budget if you don't know what's going to happen? If you don't know if it's going to be a sidewalk or a road or a paved walkway, or how did you set the budget?
I believe it's in the DCC bylaw, that amount.
So it was sitting there, so you thought, okay, we'll poach that. So that's why I'm 100% in favor of redevelopment of the waterfront and bringing people down to the waterfront. I've been watching this debate for 20 years about how we accommodate cars and people who can't or not. There was a time when the owners along there didn't want the front closed at all. They wanted their road access along the front. That's changed, I think, as we've heard. So it's a good time to move that forward in some positive way. I'm actually in favor of the minimal car, but we do have to accommodate them in some way. But I don't approve budgets that don't seem to have any structural function to them or design. I thought we had business cases for all these things that said this is why we're going in this direction, as opposed to there's a pot of money over there, we're going to put it over here and then go out and ask the public what we should spend it with. So I'm concerned about that. I'm sure I'll get a response that allays my concerns and makes me go forward, and that'll be useful. I just want that. I need to hear that. And Councillor Wright, and then Councillor Mueller.
No, thank you, Worship. So if this didn't get approved, could we still go ahead with the public engagement?
Yes.
And what sort of a timeline are you looking at, or have you given any thought to that timeline? Is it a 3-month, 4-month, 6-month timeline?
I haven't given it a timeline at this point, but we could start the public consultation as quickly as we can, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Seegers. Sorry, Councillor, I saw you first. So the mic's on.
If you started public consultation now, would you have information back in sufficient time to inform the budget process?
Probably not. Again, I'd have to think about that. Possibly, yes.
So this could be something that could be deferred down the road.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, when I saw this come forward, I was probably more concerned about the issue of the great tsunami coming along that particular stretch. You know, this closure of the boulevard in that particular section was supposed to happen back in 2010, I believe. So it's been postponed many times. But as after that, you know, we did get a fairly healthy storm move into that area up onto the boulevard, and the cost of reducing that threat was going to be in multi-millions of dollars. And I'd rather maybe address that before we actually do any improvements on here. And so that's in the back of my mind. Let's put it that way. So I wouldn't be in favor of moving ahead until such time as consultation had at least taken place. So.
And Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I think we have to give some good thought to the continuation of the linear parks that are on either side of this particular proposal. It has gone on for a number of years, so if we can find a way to move towards public consultation to determine what we're going to finally do with that particular section of walkway and or rehabilitate it, it's a linear park that should continue through the downtown area. I think it's all important to many members of this council to have these linear parks for walkability. The issue that Councillor Shanks is speaking to is the Green Shores issue that we've talked about a number of times. This plan, if well put together and planned as part of it, could have a Green Shores component to deal with the concern we have over coastal degradation that I spoke to starting 10 years ago. That's something that we should be turning our mind to, but it's very expensive. But if we don't, it's probably going to cause wave degradation over a number of years.
Okay, and we'll start looking for some closure on this particular one, which is actually about early approval for the amount and whether we're comfortable with early approval. Councillor Wright and then Councillor Seegers.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was quite prepared to support this project, but now I'm having second thoughts about it. I believe that we do need to go ahead with the public engagement, and as I look at that timeline in my mind, I think that this is a project that's probably not going to get started until next year at this time in terms of putting it into a budget. It's going to take that long, okay, to come up with a design or at least some thoughts on it, and then have that public engagement and then tune it accordingly. So I don't see any need for early approval on this particular project. I guess the question I have is how much would it cost to have the public engagement, and that portion I would be prepared to support, but I don't think I'll support the rest. Thank you.
And do you have an easy answer on that one, and we don't need early approval for it?
Yeah, I don't know the cost of a public consultation, unfortunately, to provide at this time.
Thanks. And Councillor Seegers?
Councillor Wright addressed my concern as well. I would like to see something going in here for early approval for a public consultation. If that happens, can it still be split as indicated between DCC reserves and general capital reserve? I mean, this one's showing $1,740 coming out of general capital reserve, the rest from DCCs. If that's the split that we can still do for the public consultation piece, the portion from our capital budget is actually minimal. So I'm looking to staff for clarification on that.
Actually, well, not quite, we can't quite do it the way you suggested. It's a DCC project that's 100% funded from DCCs. The district was required to provide that assist factor.
Yes.
So it's always going to be 99% DCCs, 1% district funds, regardless of how much is spent. So if you did a $10,000 consultation, you'd be looking at $100 from district funds and $9,900 from DCCs. So that percentage split remains with the project.
Right, but if we just do public consultation, what I'm saying, can we still do the split as indicated? Can that
It actually
portion-
must be done as indicated,
Okay.
99 and 1%.
So another way of rephrasing the same question, is public consultation DCCable?
Yes, everything as far as consultation design can
Okay.
be capitalized as part of the project.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd make a motion that staff come back with an estimate on the cost of public consultation
For the budget process, for the regular budget process?
for the regular budget process, yes.
Now, we have a motion on the floor, so let's deal with that first, and I suspect it'll simply be defeated. But what's on the floor is early approval for the Trail to Ocean Community Park capital project for $174,000. I'll ask, do you want to speak before I ask for that vote?
Yes, please.
Okay, and I'll ask, after Councillor Mueller's spoken, I'll ask for a vote on that, and then we'll go to Councillor Seeger's recommendation.
I think this is one of those tough ones because while most of us agree that some type of redevelopment would be good, we also have an envelope of money from the DCCs outlined in that plan that tells us kind of the rough outline of what it is, gives this decision some structure. In reality, we're going to go through the basic process of public engagement, come up with the best solution, whatever that cost is, and go for it. The tough part is that we don't want to signal to the community that something as big as this will be a done deal. We're talking about the community's most favorite park and also changes to traffic, which we know that they get upset about from time to time. I don't know how we do this in a way where we don't give that impression to the community that something large is going to happen and it's a done deal. I'd like it to go forward, but I don't know. I don't have the mechanism. I'm not sure if the mayor can suggest anything.
I think Councillor Seegers is on the track to getting where we want to go on that. So first, I'll ask all those that are actually comfortable and confident to provide early approval for this project to raise their hands. 1, 2, and then I'll ask those who are opposed at the moment, and that's defeated. And then Councillor Seegers, you had a motion that we get an estimate on, or a budget proposal for public consultation and early design. I think we should put they have to have something enough to consult with, so there has to be an early design. Preliminary design. Yeah, options. Okay. And that's for the regular budget process. As much as we'd all like to see this being built in the summer, there's really good reasons, even in an election year, to stick to process, make sure we know what we're talking about, make sure we're approving things that are in hand and not simply spilling out the door because it's convenient. Seconded by Councillor Wright. Yes, and we'll ask staff to read it back after Councillor Seeger's spoken to it.
When I indicated that part of the motion should be preliminary design options, I think we need to take into account the concerns that have raised here and will be raised by the community for those who have access issues. And that could be reflected in the design options that are put forward so that we can get the feedback from the community on all of the potentials. Thank you.
Yep. And the question we're actually going to be voting on, just to make sure, because we sort of did it on the fly. Could you read it back? And welcome back, Carrie Ann. Carrie Ann's been away for mat leave.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Seegers, could you clarify if I should include the consideration for community concerns in the motion? Okay. Then what I have is that staff bring a cost estimate for public consultation and preliminary design options for regular budget deliberations.
Good enough. Seconded. They're happy with it. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thanks. That's carried. And that doesn't preclude the fact that when we get to regular budget and we see that, we could have further discussions about DCC reserves and how to access them very quickly if consultation went very well. That's 2.6. 2.7. I'll look for somebody to put this on. The early approval of Trail Avenue Storm Trunk Line project for $250,000 be granted. Councillor Seegers, and seconded by Councillor Shanks. Thank you. And introduced by the Director of Corporate and Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this project is for a sewer line. Currently, the drainage system on Trail Avenue is an open ditch. This would provide a sewer line along Trail from Ebb Tide to Pebble Crescent and then divert it to Sechelt Marsh. This will increase the capacity of the existing storm line on Trail Avenue from Dolphin to the Sechelt Marsh. And as you see, it is again funded from DCC reserves with the 1% assist factor coming from general capital.
Councillor Mueller.
So I assumed the letters we might get when we were talking about putting our storm drains into the Sechelt Marsh. I believe it does actually go into the wetland, natural wetland on the corner. Isn't that correct? Or is there a pipe flowing directly to the marsh from our stormwater?
Yes, you are correct. It's going to the first small marsh, and then there's a silt trap, and then going to the marsh.
Okay, we might want to change the language on that just so that people understand it's a natural hydrologic flow, and
So we're working with nature.
Yeah.
And it's going into the marsh at the corner of Ebb Tide and Trail, and then it silt trap, and then it flows towards the larger
Yes.
unit? Okay. Yep. Yeah, I think as long as...
I think if we just put the word natural in there, natural flow towards the Sechelt Marsh, people will understand that we're not diverting in any unnatural way.
Okay. We'll take that as a, Councillor Inkster.
Okay, well, I hope that the communication is very clear because we are capturing, it's natural, we're capturing man-made elements in it. So
Yep.
hope that our processes we put in place before it goes into a natural protected area will capture and or deal with some of the man-made chemicals and issues that we're trying to making sure we're dealing with.
It'll be coming off roads, and that's why there's
Yes.
silt.
Yeah, and traps for petroleum products, I guess, if possible. Anything we can do. I mean, there's things that we can do with filters and stuff, so. Okay.
Okay, you've heard those concerns in terms of design and engineering.
This is also part of the trail avenue design, so this everything's integrated together without the ditch going to the pipe. We don't have enough room to provide this the proposed multi-use pathways. We have only 20-meter right of way, so that's why we need to have the put in the pipe.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That one's carried. And 2.8, early approval of Trail Avenue construction. Yeah. Phase 1. Let's get that on the floor. Let's see. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Mueller, and then discussion. It's moved and seconded. Director Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yes, this project is the continuation of the work to upgrade Trail Avenue. The design work is currently being done as part of the 2017 capital budget. This was in the plan to be started in 2018, so it's a $2.5 million project for road improvements along providing new access to the Trail Bay Mall, multiple intersections along Trail and Cowrie, realigned ebb tide intersection and Trail Avenue, a proposed turning lane on Neptune Street, and a full-depth road reclamation and restoration at the end of the works. This may provide also a multi-use pathway in order to provide efficient and safe transportation. And again, it's $2.5 million, primarily 99% funded from current DCCs, with taxation picking up 1% or $25,000. And again, the idea of this one is to get the tenders out before the budget.
So early approval means we could have equipment disrupting the traffic by July and August? Just curious how soon we could do that.
Canada Day would be nice.
Okay. But before October. Okay. I would look to staff for a moment, and then I've got some councillors in line.
We will try to minimize the traffic and disruption. Sometimes we are not doing any work during the summertime within the downtown area. Maybe we can focus a little bit off the downtown, and then the winter time we can bring it over the downtown area.
But you are hoping for shovels in the ground in 2018?
Yes, so we're hoping that the April is turned out.
Okay. Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Is the design complete yet?
Not yet. We did the first public consultation. Now they are doing the 50% design and bring it back to again for public consultation.
Thank you. When do you expect the design to be completed?
Next month, end of next month, we are going to have a 50% design and a public consultation. The final design will be end of March, and then we'll bring the 90% design back to the council approval.
So the final design will be completed by the end of March?
We seek the council approval by early April.
April.
Yes.
So I guess when I look at that timeline, I have to ask the question, why are we looking for early approval? Because we haven't finished the design. We've got the money to do the design. The budget will be approved by sometime in March or April. And I guess I'm wondering why we want early approval on this one.
I think the budget approval date is a little different.
Yes, I mean, ideally, we could get it done sooner, depending on how we move forward, but the statutory requirement is to have the budget approved by May 15th. So So it is possible it could take till that.
So May 15th, and we'd like the tenders to be out in April.
Yes, so because the timing is very limited time to construction, so we're trying to, put a BC bid and set up the contractor and ready for construction and as per our schedule.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Worship. So if we're not going to do any work in the downtown area over the summer months, construction couldn't begin till at the very earliest September. Is that correct?
Start the work, towards up, not the downtown area.
Okay.
So
Typically wouldn't want to issue tenders until the budget's secured. So again, if we're issuing tenders in April, it'd be nice to know the budget's in place.
I'm still struggling with why we're looking for early approval, that's all. Thank you.
I think people think of downtown as being between Dolphin and Trail, that area sort of, and there's another one almost a full kilometer towards other parts, so that's where they would work. The early approval is whether this actually gets started in 2018 or whether it gets started in 2019. That's what we're actually voting on. 2018, if we vote for early approval, and if we don't, I can assure you it'll be 2019. So, any further discussion? It's 2.8, early approval for $2.5 million. All those in favor? Any opposed? Major project infrastructure, finally. Wasn't this sitting at our table when we got elected in 2014? Almost. So I think that concludes the requests for early approval, which are all those items in 6.1. Moving then to 6.2, and report from the director on communication strategy. First, a motion that it be received. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Wright. All those in favor? That's carried. And I'll turn to the director again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this report is simply to bring a communication strategy forward for the committee's consideration, primarily to deal with the public input process. This is required under the community charter, and certainly a good thing to do anyway. So at this point, we're presenting all the information to the public. That's what the purpose, what I saw of the meeting last FCD meeting, where the operating budget was presented. We're now talking about capital. We'll go through those projects. We'll probably bring the additional list to the committee of things that aren't funded in February, and then ultimately have the public input period after that, but prior to this committee actually making any decisions other than the ones for the early approval. At this point, we're not recommending too much other than an town hall meeting being held near the end of February with the communication manager starting in a few weeks. She may have some other ideas of how to perhaps use social media, use other ways to get the word out, but I was going to leave it up to her to perhaps supplement what was being decided here. But the real crux here is to seek or find a date when we could have that town hall meeting and start working towards that.
Which is February 20th.
That was the date we're proposing. It's not really a critical date. It seemed for myself time to allow the next FCD meeting in February to allow us to get through all the work here, but somewhere between that and the March meeting to have that public input, allow us to document what was heard, so to be able to get that back to the March FCD meeting when we get into the full deliberations.
Okay.
So that was why that date was picked, but there's no magic reason why.
We might consider it in terms of absentees from council in February, but it's not major. We will have a quorum, I think, for most of it. Any questions of the communication strategy as outlined? I noticed the first bullet in 3.6, a special briefing for local media representatives. We'll endorse that one. Will we give them lunch that day too?
Last year, we just invited them in for a morning coffee. Only one person showed up.
Or maybe lunch and asked to proof what they're going to write. I don't think they would take such gifts. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. So we were presented with this financial plan draft in December. It was Fascinating reading over the holidays. When in this plan do we actually talk about the operating budget? I don't see that indicated here. Which meeting will be?
That would be the meeting starting in March, essentially. At this point, I'm seeing presenting all the information to the committee, then we go to the public to hear what they have to say about all the information that's being presented. And starting in March is really when the discussion would come. Almost reviewing, going back to what we started in December and working our way through it again, but actually making decisions at that point.
Okay, thank you very much.
And making those decisions having had some community input. Okay. Other discussions on the, and this is the communications strategy. Any discussions on that? Then a motion 2.2, that the communication strategy as outlined by district staff be endorsed. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Mueller, all those in favor? That's carried. Moving then to 6.3. And again, this is our first take, a report for business cases to be received. I'd ask for a motion on that. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Seegers, all those in favor? And we'll ask the director to speak to that. And we will probably not speak to the various individual ones again. This is to get it on the table so people can start reviewing it and go to the public. And then you might want to outline when we get back to some of these.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So essentially this will follow the same process we did for the early approval. I thought I'd introduce each project. Various staff members are here to answer questions should you have any for further clarification. As you said, it's not really seeking any decision from the committee right now, other than I guess if you really hate a project, you may as well tell us to cut it now, but otherwise we're really not looking for any approvals. We certainly want to hear from the public before any of those processes work through. So
you would like to go through them, as many as we can in the next half hour?
Certainly.
Okay. With that, I'll ask Councillor Lutz to take the chair for a few minutes and give me a break. I'm sure the rest of you need it, but I'm going to take it.
Well, shall we begin?
Certainly. So just on this PowerPoint, so this is the, just point out more for anyone who's listening, we did produce a list of business cases for council and the public. Council received them last week. They are available online for anyone in the public who would like to see them. It goes through more detail of the projects, further detail than what was actually in the original book that was produced in December. This is the list of projects in the entire capital plan, and I guess we'll just start going through them one by department. So on the vehicles and equipment, we've got one project. This is the acquisition of a new excavator to replace the current excavator that's 13 years old and is actually in need of major repairs. The budget for this is $135,000.
Any comments or questions around the excavator? Yes.
Just a reminder of the financing portion of it, the MFA financing of the term.
At this point, it's essentially coming from, it'd be short-term debt. That's how we've got it in the books for now. So it would be a 5-year borrowing for $110,000. We do believe we can get $25,000 trade-in for the current excavator to cover the funding.
So it's financed at like 2% or something like that over 5 years.
It would be over 5 years, yes.
So like 2%.
Interest-wise?
Yeah.
Perhaps 2%, but you'd be looking also at 20% of that payback. So it would probably be about $25,000 a year going forward.
Thank you. Anything further on that? Next.
So now we're to the parks projects. So the first one is the Chapman Trails. This is to complete the Section 56 application for the remainder of Chapman Trail and to add directional signage, kiosks and trail maintenance. The budget for this is $17,000. And we funded from the gas tax reserve.
Questions? Yes.
I was just curious about the dollar value. So we've got a $17,000 request more or less for Are we seeing expanded trail? Is that what's going on? Or is it just the signs and kiosks?
These trails already exist. They've been well used by the public for a number of years. There is a section that is in need of some drainage and improvements. It's only about 150 meters long. And the majority of the money is for signing the trails and getting kiosks and making it identifiable for walking for the pedestrians that use these trails. So as you can see from the map here, there's 2 new existing kiosks. Our hope is that one of the kiosks will be funded through the new subdivision, I believe. The other kiosk at the end of Skylark Road will be put in by us. And then we're going to need signage, directional signage at each of the intersections as well. So this will tie into the existing section 57 that runs from the top of Selma Park Road all the way to the airport and complete the section 57 for this area of trail. So it will allow us to actually sign it and make sure that they're safe for the public.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anything further? Oh, yes. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. There was a comment or a note in here from the ministry with regards to the 57, section 57 designation. What can we not do if we don't have that? Is it signage that we can't do?
That's correct. We can't sign it. We can't maintain it. We can't do anything to it until we get the approval of the section 57. That is basically through Recreations and Trails BC. And we have an early agreement with the recreational officer for this area, Alistair McCrone, that he will support this application. So it's all tied in to the capital approval.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So this next project, it says $15,000 funded from gas tax to complete the pedestrian access way between Eagle View Road and Chapman Creek Road.
And is that out of gas tax?
It'd be proposed to be funded from gas tax, yes.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So that's where the contentious vacant parcel is next door? Yeah, that's right. Okay.
That's
That'd be
correct.
good to have a connection there.
Yeah, it's a very narrow access, but
Yeah.
totally doable. And one of the problems right now is that people are just cutting through private property to access from there and going through the neighborhood homes.
So this will eliminate that.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I had a little bit more of a general question. I forget where it is in here, but it talked about staff meeting with the different community members to get a view of their priorities. And some of these projects have popped up in the past year. They weren't new, so I'm just curious. Is that where these are coming from, or are they?
That's correct. They've been initiated by the associations.
Right.
This concern's been going on for a couple of years now, maybe longer. And so that's why we brought it forth this year for development to relieve that concern. It's once this access is in, there'd be no reason for anybody to use any other connector point between that portion of Davis Bay and Chapman Road. It's unfortunate that it wasn't actually put in at the time of development, but that was a very long time ago.
And I'm happy to see them here because they are of a low ticket item and they clearly coming from community request, and we can do a number of these in each neighborhood, which I like to see. Mm-hmm. So maybe just flag those as they come up so that we know that that's where they came from. Thanks.
All right, next.
Next one was Nespin Beach, but we already discussed that one. Next one was the garbage cans. The next one we haven't talked about is the Selma Park Beach Lookout. This project is to create a lookout at Selma Park to be fully accessible and include a split rail fence, native landscaping, a West Coast log bench, and heritage signage to provide historical information about the significance of the location. budget's $9,500 and proposed to be funded from the gas tax reserve.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Yes.
I think I may have pressed my button ahead of Darren. So this one, it's intended that anybody who visits this is going to park on Summer Park Road, is that correct? Or is it going to
Yes,
have,
there is public parking on Summer Park Road.
it's somewhat limited? I think there's maybe space for 6 or 10.
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
Is there going to be any access down onto that beach from that lookout?
Yes, there is. There's an existing deck that connects the two right now, but as that's not our property, it won't be promoted. It will be quite obvious that that could provide access to the Sechelt Nation marina and that side of the beach. There won't be access down the other side because it's now blocked off by the private residents.
Yeah, that was my question about skirting the rocks to get down to this lower beach.
Oh yeah, no,
And that's not possible.
no. That's why we put in the Benner Beach access. What I think that was in 2013 as well, and that was one of the reasons that moved in pretty quick because that's the only way you can connect from Selma Park Beach to Davis Bay Beach now is going up the Benner Beach access. It's a very short walk along the highway on a very wide road shoulder, and then you're back down over into Selma Park Road.
Great, thanks.
Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, this it's interesting that the parking's been limited by those that have residential parking nearby that like the parking that we provided, which is easier to get in and out of. It's kind of ironic. I hope that the information that's provided there, that as you've indicated, Perry, has some. I'm assuming you'll do this, but I'm just an encouragement to have some First Nations components because of where you're locating the interpretive signage.
Absolutely. We're going to have to the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have our archaeological permits in place, and they'll be very aware that we're doing this project. You know, we've already talked with Kenzie Jessam, the archaeologist that works with In Situ and is contracted by the Sechelt Nation, and the historic implications of this area are huge. This, as you know, was the area where the Selma came in, and there was a previous dock there. It was a beehive of activity, and prior to that, it was well used for hundreds of years. So that's what the information signage that we want to put in that area hopefully will capture.
Okay, good.
That's great. I'm glad I got back in time to put in my 2 cents on how this. I've got a great picture. I think it's on my iPad. I was hoping it was on here of an individual resident in a wheelchair sitting at the end of that just from clearing the gravel from the last summer. It was spring, and it's going to be really well used. It's going to be a really prime lookout. Any other questions on number 6? Thank you. Let's move along to one we just talked about and decided we can skip. Let's go to number 8. And these are just preliminary, no long discussions on it. It's only $2.6 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, this project is the construction of a new permanent operations center building to house public works, parks, facility maintenance, fleet maintenance, and a records management storage area. Project currently is in the budget for $2.7 million, approximately $955,000 of that's from reserves. The rest would be long-term borrowing once we get the cost estimates in place.
Now, you didn't ask for early approval on this.
No, typically this project is a carry forward from the prior year, and the policy simply says once you started the project, it's assumed that it simply keeps moving forward.
Okay. And when may we expect shovels in the ground there? Yeah, some sort of approval for funding first. That's what I was thinking.
5 months after the bylaw comes to council.
Okay. Councillors, Director Kootenay, and then.
Yes, at end of January, we'll have 75% design drawings. Okay. We do have an RFP out for the quality estimator, and I hope to have something back to council on the cost estimate by the end of February. So we're looking at May, June after the finances are in place, hopefully to get something going, maybe some shovels.
And that's especially for me, because I don't attend all the committee meetings where these things are always discussed. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Did I see something in here somewhere about an AAP process for funding of this?
Yes,
There will need
that
to
through
be
the
some.
borrowing, we'd have to go to electoral consent. And
Right, I think, yeah. So that would be part of the process as well. Thank you.
And we'll have a discussion of that too. Number 9, if there's nothing else on the Public Works Parks, mechanical refit design, and all of these have the business case attached, so people can be reading up on them and getting more information. Number 9, mechanical refit design report.
Mr. Chair, so this would be to get an evaluation by a mechanical engineer to provide information on how to improve the ventilation in this municipal hall building and to improve the thermal comfort in the high occupancy spaces. The evaluation would recommend, would try to get a cost estimate so the improvement program can be established for future budget considerations. So again, this is a study.
Councillor Seegers?
I have to say yes.
Okay.
Go upstairs and, I mean, staff all over the place. Some will be wearing coats and some will be wearing like short sleeves. Librarians talk about the fact that the building overheats. They have to have windows open when it's really cold outside. So this is a long time coming. Thank you.
Yeah, the malfunctioning is something happened in the last decade. It's just amazing. Number 10.
Mr. Chairman, this is for the RCMP facility reception renovations. It's a carry forward from 2016. We finally got the design work done, so those are actually design development and construction coordination and tendering and completion.
And that picture is current, not proposed?
I believe that is the current reception area at this point. And it's mostly safety concerns is what we're dealing with.
I just hope it's relatively welcoming, and I doubt if the end result will be. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. The amount that's indicated here, that's the total cost of the complete project, is it not? So and part of that was a carry forward from last year, and then some of it will be offset by the RCMP, correct?
Yes, that's how it's showing here. It's the fully carry forward amount of the $98,000 is what's been carried over, and the grants and contribution, $151,000, is the RCMP contribution.
Sorry, I wasn't looking at your slide. I was looking at the documents I have here.
Yes. So what's here is the total project. The split is showing on the slide.
Yeah, 250, 513. Thank you.
Okay, and item 11. Oh, sorry, Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, we don't design RCMP buildings, but we did the original, but this change, which is the rationale of security, it'll be interesting to see the design because, as you indicated, it's relatively welcoming. I find it not so much, but because of the screening in there and the glass and that. But so we'll see. This is an added protection, so we will see how it becomes, because it might become even less so. I've not seen the designs.
Yeah, the conversations I've had, and they're coming from national standards of security that are in place, is that it will be much less open to the public than this feels, even with the design there. So but it's not really a walk-in center. So they don't get a lot, unlike the second floor where we get a lot of walk-ins, they don't get a lot of walk-ins. Item 12.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this project.
Sorry, I missed the 11. Yep.
Right.
ERP.
So this project is a continuation of the multi-year project that was originally started in 2014. At this point, for 2018, most of the work we're planning is going to be completed by internal resources. We want to focus on documenting and improving our internal processes to facilitate use of the system and ultimately use the system as was originally intended. There will be a bit of consulting work involved. And as you can see, a lot of the project has been carried over to 2018, or 2019, sorry.
Thank you. And when I was reading this, I was reminded, the CAO's discussed taking a look at our overall technology. So that's not funded here, but it's part of our thinking on this. Okay. Anything else on this? Moving then to, yeah, Councillor.
I was just curious, now that we have the manager in charge, if we might be able to get perhaps more discussion on the report that was added to this. I'm not sure if other councillors had a chance to read the report.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but there is a report and business case added to the ERP planning. And perfect timing.
Yeah, sorry I wasn't here a little earlier.
Do you want to give a little bit of an...
Well, I think my question was about the report that you added onto your business case, just a kind of an update on the ERP and some of the other projects. And I know a lot of it's quite technical, so it's hard to necessarily read through it and know exactly what you mean on everything. So I'm not sure if you wanted, if this is the venue, if you wanted to give council a better update on some of these things. If it's not the appropriate time, I mean, I think that your report deserves council.
I tried really hard to keep the report readable, and I don't know whether it's appropriate for you guys to email questions or whatever if you have in relation to it. I tried to also keep it fairly brief so it's not a big, long read. The key I want to say is that we've made a ton of progress on ERP this year, but a lot of it's behind the scenes stuff. We've been waiting for a senior management team to be in place and make some key decisions and lead certain things to move forward. Some things we're waiting for the Director of Development Services to be in place. So there's a great big iceberg built, just waiting for you guys to see the impact of it. We had quite a bit planned for next year, but Doug and I talked about where we're at and the budget challenges facing council with capital this year. And most of the work planned for next year, a lot of the stuff that would cost money, we can put forward to 2019 and really focus next year on internal processes and using internal resources to get work done. The money that we're asking for it to get carried forward from last year will be used mostly for some interrelations with consultants. So we often will hire Esri to we'll talk to them once a month to get help on where we're stuck, but we're doing a lot of the stuff ourselves now. We've been trained on a lot of it. The solutions we're implementing are very, very internally configurable, and that's what's been holding us up in the sense that we've got the base built, but we needed that director in place to say, okay, now how do you want us to streamline it? Then we can go live. So some of those process changes needed to happen, and some of the implementing of the pieces you need to chart out a process. And as we chart out the process, we discover there's actually 3 processes we follow. And then we need that director in place to say, this is the one of the 3 I want you to follow. And then we can customize our solution and implement it the way we need to. And OnBase is the same. It's completely configurable that way. We just need to spend that internal resources and get it done.
Thank you. And I think the director had started by mentioning the consolidation that was going to be done this year in terms of documentation and internal processes. So that's probably a very good stage to be at. You opened by wondering about emails. Entirely appropriate for councillors to ask for clarifications on reports and business reports or the budget book, as people have been, through the CAO, and for staff always just to respond to all of council, because one person asks, but as you know from teaching, if one in the classroom asks, 2 are thinking about it. But certainly as long as council should feel very free to ask for clarification whenever they want, but always through the CAO or CC to the CAO, so that we can all benefit from it. And it is a question, for example, with came up earlier with your question about when we were going to come back to some of these, because some of us are writing in the budget book thinking we'll come back and raise all these questions, but sometimes we can't get past those pages without asking them. So you'll get a combination of those things. Anything else on ERP?
I would like at some point to have the more substantive discussion, maybe at some point later in the year when we have more of a review at hand, or it'd be great to get a full update.
Okay. And
we've talked about that. We could do a report to council that's strictly a detailed update on ERP that goes into more detail, rather than the quick one that I provided you to budget. And we can demo some of the pieces that we've got in place and what we've done. It would be nice for you guys to see the work that's happened over the last few years.
And probably this committee is the best place for it, but it might actually be a special meeting to give us an hour or two to actually address it. Anything else on this? And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I know that over time you've been looking at agendas and how they're implemented and accessed and electronic meetings, etc. It looks like you've got some pieces of that to roll out over the next while.
Yeah, that's one of the pieces that has been complicated through staff changes and that corporate services role is we had an electronic agenda management solution configured and pretty much ready to go live using OnBase and the technology that we've got in this room. Jerry Vanderwolf was hesitant to be the one to launch that, being a temporary person. And then there was a period of vacancy, and then now Joanne's on. She's not here. She's on board, so she's been catching up and getting up to speed. So we haven't been ready to launch it, and we now need to reconfigure it a bunch. But new managers have different ways of wanting to do things. New CAO has new processes, but we do have that capability to move to it. It's just about prioritizing.
Don't these new CAOs just fit in?
No. Period.
One of the things I've seen in some other communities is the ability for the agenda to actually mesh with the YouTube video that is posted. So I don't know if that's something you're looking at, or...
The system that we've got that's tied to OnBase has that capability. Okay. That's an add-on piece that we haven't purchased, that integration piece, but some of the functionality it has is an app that would be on the iPads or whatever device you have that automatically has your agendas on it, has the markup built into it, so there's none of this fetching and getting it in your email. And then the minutes are taken in conjunction with how the agenda's been built. And the minutes, every time you start and end an item, you start and end the clock on the minutes. So then it's easy to synchronize it to your video because it's got that start and end times all tied to it. And the OnBase solution, it does integrate with YouTube. It's one of the pieces that we...
I know I've found it valuable when I've gone to look at other communities and their minutes, to be able to look at an agenda package and then find, you know, the video and the conversation and the dialogue that's happened with regards to a particular item.
And one of the pieces that's built into it is that from the OnBase solution, when you hit publish for the agenda, it automatically goes to the website and there's a link for the agenda. When you hit publish for the minutes, and there's an approval process and things like that happen too, the minutes are automatically linked right next to that agenda. So when you're on the website, you're looking at sort of a meetings portal and you're seeing the meeting, you're seeing the agenda, the minutes, and you can jump from the agenda, a particular item, 4.2 on an agenda, and you can see the minutes for that item. And then if we decide we've got the funds and it's the right use of money to actually integrate it with the video, you will be able to do that as well.
Okay, thank you. And I look forward to the Director of Development Services and input and moving some of those other pieces forward.
My challenge the last 2 years is, and especially this year and kind of my mission this year, is to step back from leading some of these projects and really wait for those directors to guide me and to say, this is what we want to implement. We want to implement the agenda management piece or this piece, because with the vacancies, a lot of it's been done from the bottom up, and we've got a lot done, but now it's at that point where we need to hold off and we're waiting for direction.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have 10 minutes left in the scheduled time for this meeting, so we'll have to think through what that means, if anything. Item 12, computer hardware replacement upgrades.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is really an annual replacement budget for computer hardware. This year, the proposal would be to replace 5 laptops that were purchased in 2013, and in fact, are 2 years out of warranty, and 2 kiosk computers that were purchased in 2012 and are now 3 years out of warranty. As I say, it's really an annual program to ensure our equipment remains up to date.
I don't see any questions on that. 13.
This project, again, is a replacement project. It's a little bit different because it's looking at the core enterprise computing network hardware and replacing it with a new type of hardware, I guess, and software, really. So it's we've got here to include a storage array and 3 VMware host servers with a single hyper-converged infrastructure. The one VMware host that's still under warranty, we feel we could relocate it off-site and provide business continuity and disaster recovery. The other servers are all out of warranty at this point, and in fact will be completely covered by anyone after 2020.
Okay. 14, you're expecting new council or new council technology?
New council technology for anyone who wants to be sitting up at these, ends up sitting up at these seats in November.
Okay. Yeah, cattle prods.
So this budget is essentially that to replace the council technology that was provided 4 years ago and provide you with updated equipment.
And 4 years is a long time in technology. Some of the things we're using are not as impressive as they were 4 years ago. Frustrating. 15, Trail Bay Outfall. Oh, sorry, Councillor Seegers on new
Thank
technology.
you. New council technology, and I noticed in here you were talking about iPads. And I mean, I've approached you and I've talked to the senior staff, CAO and Director of Finance, about potentially Surface machines. Up until recently, Surface was not available with the
LTE.
Yes, the LTE, the connection, which is why. So our iPads right now stay connected, no matter where we are. The Surface was not available with that technology until very recently, like within the last couple of months. So I'm just wondering if the amount you've got in this budget is sufficient to cover off for Surface machines, if that's the direction we choose to go.
It's not. And I've just asked for a quote to find out exactly what those would cost. And they would improve your email interaction experience. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges this council is using the mail app in the iPads. Going to a Microsoft Surface device would have proper full email. I also talked to the Director of Finance, and barring the quote being extremely high, we can probably make it work with some IT budget and other budget areas if it ends up being higher and we choose to go with the Surface device. But I should have those numbers this week. I'll make sure we have them. If it's significantly higher, bring it forward to you, but I'm hoping we can stay close to that.
Okay, one of the other areas that I see an issue is when we get Word documents or Excel spreadsheets or any of those kinds of things. The iPad just does not do well with them. I mean, it mixes things up that we have to print it. There's no way. We just can't access it on here. Or I send it to my own machine and, access it there. So that is a downfall of the iPad. So I'll look further to that.
Apple is very proprietary. Councillor Inkster.
I guess if we move to a different direction with devices, then they're all standard, so we have to all get the same one if it does change. So
we'll have that discussion. Having used both, I can't stand the Surface.
Yeah,
but the iPad is frustrating, as Councillor Seegers has pointed out. It's proprietary, and you keep running into those walls where it doesn't work. So
I mean, there are apps.
Yeah, they're not fun. It's not good. I like the iPad better.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll have that discussion. Not now. We'll take a break at 3 o'clock just to ask ourselves whether we want to continue this or come back, but we'll go for another 5 minutes. Number 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, number 15. We're halfway through almost.
Yes. So this is the Trail Bay outfall upgrade. As part of the 2017 capital project, the district completed part of the drainage improvement works at Ocean Inlet. This included installation of backflow preventer valves at the outfalls. So this project is the second phase of that. It includes the completion of the storm outfall structure, which could not be completed due to the unavailability of a waterfront license of occupation that we're attempting to get from the province.
Okay. This is storm?
This is storm outfall, yes. Yeah. And it is a DCC, or sorry, it's a capital project. It's not DCC's, and it's carried forward from 2017.
Okay. Any questions?
Why is it so long if it's storm?
It's being extended. So could you answer that question?
The reason is that we didn't have that the license of occupation for the outfall on Ocean Avenue, and it's a long process from the province. It's needed the First Nation consultation, and there's whole bunch of information. So we are in the process. We had the meeting with First Nations, and this is very successful. And they said they will provide us a letter of support, and the process is now in progress.
I think Councillor Inkster was wondering about the distance. Why it seems to stretch quite a ways into the bay. It seems to be further out than the old shortfall.
The same location, the current location. We are not extending the pipe.
You're not? Okay. 16.
That's the marine wall, retaining wall?
I think we missed the storm trunk line, ebb tide to Pebble.
We did discuss that one as part of
true.
the
Yep.
early capital approval.
Thanks. Only an hour ago, and I've forgotten.
So
17.
This is a Marineway retaining wall, the project to fix the falling rock portions of the Marineway and to build further support for the wall to eliminate the possibility of future failure. The estimated budget for this is $123,000, proposed to be coming from the Public Safety Reserve.
No questions. It is public safety. Councillor Seegers.
Sorry, was this carry forward as well, this amount, or was it a lesser amount?
Yes, it's a carry forward.
Carry forward.
18.
So this is the Trail Avenue alignment and safety improvements. This is the same one. To include new access Trail Bay Mall, multiple intersections. Looks like the same report I've had before.
Yep, we've done this. 19, Wakefield Road Culvert.
So this one is a $500,000 project. It was not in the plan last year. It was basically an unexpected project. It's the replacement of the failing CSP culvert crossing that's under Wakefield Road. Is for part of the Wakefield Creek tributary. The works would include a new upstream and downstream headwalls and allow for widening of the corridor of Wakefield Road at this location.
See no questions. And the question I will ask committee though, do you want to finish this agenda in the next 20 minutes if we can and then be concluded? Depending on appointments and expectations, nobody expected to be here past 3, so just want to check that. We'll try and go forward then. Councillor Mueller?
Well, I think, you know, we've had the folder sent to us with more substantive stuff.
Yep.
I was envisioning at some point that we would go through these perhaps in more detail, which I think is going to happen later on in the budget process. Is that correct? When we go through project by project in full detail for the vote?
Yes, I'd anticipated coming with the plan and seeking, rather than going through every project individually, asking the committee if there was ones they wanted to pull out and discuss further, on the assumption that some may not require any further discussion. And then ultimately you'd be approving them, unless you actually want to vote on every project individually, which is certainly an option as well.
I think that when we come back to it, we should at least get a pass, go through them all individually and get a pass on them rather than the reverse, which is to negative billing, say which ones do you really want to discuss. I'd rather see us actually say, no, we don't need to discuss that. Let's go on. Because we do need the detailed discussion that we're not getting now. And it's not just for approval and it's not just for financing, it's for comprehension and understanding of the business of the district. So we're really know what's going forward in 2018. So there's a number of factors in the budgeting that isn't just about approving the numbers. So there has to be that stage for councillors and for myself.
So I think my point was that if we're going to continue going through things, glancing through them, that
we don't really need to.
I've read them. Yeah. They're online.
Councillor Seegers.
The only thing I'd be looking for again is a split of the carry forward amounts and the new. So this again is the list of all of the items that will make up the capital budget for this year. But I know some of them that have been carried forward and some amounts that have been carried forward. I'd like to have that in one place. So even just this table that you gave us, but with 2 columns, carry forward and total. Okay?
Isn't that in the budget book, in Ben's book? Not yet?
Not in this
Not yet,
form.
no. 'Cause
Not
I
in a
thought it
very
was similar
simple
to the
form.
form that's on the slides, no?
It's in
Yes,
the,
it's in the book that way, but we can certainly,
it's in the book in the big table, yes.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
But I'm
And
just
not
thinking,
not
like, for 1 year.
individually? Not individually?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because
Simple.
that's information, the kind of detail that we would get into for discussion.
we certainly have that. Councilor Seeger's right, it's just hidden rows, columns here, so we can easily produce that.
Easy, okay.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, I agree with Councilor Mueller.
Yeah,
I've
we don't
read
need-
most of this. We don't need to go through it in detail like this now.
Yeah, if we're not going through it in detail,
Yeah, we're not. so-
then is there anyone who needs to go through it in lesser, just to be reminded what's there? Seeing no takers. I think we should thank, and the, moving to 3.7, which is the staffing request, business cases, again, that sounded to me like that might be a conversation for in camera. If we,
Which one?
but you could tell us if there's anything in 3.7 we should think about, I guess. So what I'm proposing is people have said there's sufficient on 3.6. The following chart lists all of the capital projects. They've seen them, they've read them, they know what they are. They don't need any clarification until we go through them in detail. And then if we move to 3.7, again, if we were going to have any sort of an in-depth discussion on staffing, it would probably roll into a closed meeting discussion. I can talk to this director and CAO about that, why I think that, but we've got them notified. We know what the business case is for them. Unless there's a direct question of committee at this stage. Okay, I'll look for a motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor? That's carried. While I have council here, is there any